Mm. Totally, I forgot to hit recording. Assalamu alaikum. I hope that everyone is having a peaceful. What is it? Wednesday. Wednesday. Tomorrow is my mother's birthday, and yesterday was my dad's birthday. So shout out to them. And how many times, especially think about in life, especially if you're a part of a historically excluded or coercively displaced community, how many times have you heard someone say, just get over it? It happened a long time ago. Why are you all still on that? You all are causing division. It doesn't matter anymore because X, Y, and Z happened. It's a form of historical gaslighting. When we think of the injustices of our communities, and when we think about things that have still continued to permeate the different echelons of our society, and sometimes we challenge those aspects. Sometimes we are met with, just get over it. You need to have a thicker skin. You're being too sensitive. It's not that big of a deal. Slavery's been over for a long time. Why are you all still talking about racism? Racism doesn't exist because we had a black president or we had a black vice president. So those particular check boxes is an indicator to some people that the practices or how people practice injustice does not exist. And we know that that's not true. That policy and practice are vastly different. When we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, we have to understand that diversity, equity, inclusion isn't just about celebrations, isn't just about, even talking about history, right? It's also an accountability structure to support the end of injustices for communities that are historically excluded and coercively displaced. I remember back in the day, I used to work for a government-funded program where the special population that I used to work with was Appalachians. And I remember going into, some of the schools and some of the teachers, because, there were no black teachers in this particular area. And this particular area is actually where I grew up at. And they were confused. Well, if this program is for historically excluded communities, then why are you working with our students? Our students aren't black. Our students aren't this and that. Well, historical exclusion also includes our Appalachian communities, right? That have been historically impacted by health disparities, environmental issues, when it comes to education and educational attainment, when it comes to the opioid epidemic as well, too, that obliterates Appalachian communities. When it comes to, legacies of poverty and, illiteracy in the community. My grandfather couldn't read or write. And I'm 36. But sometimes we tend to forget that these injustices are not this far away, distant area that we can just reminisce about, right? There are tentacles. There are, this roar of energy that permeates through the policies, practices, programming, protocol, and pedagogy of our society. Not just the presence of, but the absence of as well, too. So we could have strong policies that protect different communities, but we have to ask ourselves, are those policies to protect ourselves, our organizations, or to protect the communities? And we know that there have been accountability structures that have been developed to protect against legal recourse, but without the investment of making sure that practices are available that prevent bullying, that prevent individuals from being impacted from microaggressions or different unjust treatment. So policy and practices don't always neatly align when it comes to how we enact this work. And historical gaslighting will make anyone believe that naming injustices, naming the historical patterns that continue to nestle itself within our communities is being too dramatic, too aggressive, problem seeking, etc. Well, within this work, especially of diversity, equity, inclusion, and making sure that individuals are not only just seen, right? Not only the optic driven approaches, but are affirmed, that they feel like they belong, that they feel like not only they have a seat at the table, because we know that having a seat at the table is not enough. We know that individuals are invited to a seat at the table all the time, but do they have a voice? And are their experiences affirmed once they are at that table? And who is at the head of that table, telling individuals that their voices matter and their voices are not as important in the scheme of things? Who is missing from that table? Are we making decisions on behalf of different communities without their input because we think we know what is best? Happens. So, historical gaslighting occurs when a society, one, does not understand the long-lasting impact injustice has on the policies, practices, programming, and protocol and pedagogy of a society. Historical gaslighting occurs when individuals not just don't know, but refuse to take accountability, where systems refuse to take accountability or do not want the accountability or actually see a benefit of the oppressive nature of a system towards maintaining a status quo, towards maintaining systems of subservience, or a view that if individuals are oppressed in certain groups, that it will bring in other individuals up by nature. When we know that society, and we know just by history itself, just by examining history, that is not the case. It never happens that way. Systems of oppression, colonization, meritocracy, capitalism, even with the best intentions, can still have drastic impacts on even the communities that they are wanting to say that they are trying to protect and serve. We have to understand, in order to dismantle historical gaslighting, that there is a difference between intention and impact. The individuals can walk around and say that they intended for this to happen. They intended for this to develop for the community. But the impact may be more graver. But it takes an accountability mindset for those things to be shifted. But accountability requires the ability for us to say, we got it wrong. We made a mistake. That we are part of the problem. That maybe you are part of the problem. Maybe I am part of the problem. Maybe we are all, in a sense, part of this problem that has been more explicit now. This isn't new, right? We're not experiencing a new wave. And even with the rolling back of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that are happening in organizations, nonprofits, higher education spaces, etc., companies, we know that there has been a rolling back of diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives for many, many years. Individuals that have worked in this field, like myself, we've seen the dismantling of employee relations groups, resource groups, committees, the shortening of budgets for certain departments and divisions, the view that different work isn't needed because there is now a historically excluded representative on cabinets or heads of different departments, that the optics and the inclusion means that equity has happened. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and this is where we, even as DE&I professionals, have to also take accountability as well too, in making sure that we adjust even our frameworks. That inviting people to the table, and again, they don't feel affirmed once they get there. It's not enough. We have to couple this work with belonging work. We have to also understand that systems of colonization, meritocracy, racism, homophobia, transphobia, etc., that permeate through our community, xenophobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, etc., that permeates through our communities. If we make exceptions for them, to say, well, we can utilize it to weaponize it towards these particular aspects or these particular things that we don't agree with, then we're still not doing the work of diversity, equity, inclusion. So we have to, one, be able to find ways to strategically look at this work of diversity, equity, inclusion, but also we have to, two, be able to support different pathways where we are inviting other people to the table that maybe we have isolated and we have gaslit ourselves or gate kept away from the work because we didn't like how it was being actualized. Well, there is a place for everyone within diversity, equity, inclusion. And maybe we as diversity, equity, inclusion professionals have not done a good job in showing people that they also have a role to play in making sure that we all are invested in diversity, equity, inclusion. So we see historical gaslighting, that we are prioritizing the pain of others and remembering the pain of others and validating the pain of others while saying that other people's pain and experiences are not as important. And even utilizing the byproduct of those systems, which is community violence, etc., to say that, well, if they were in so much pain, then X wouldn't happen or A wouldn't happen, or etc., right? Not seeing the bigger picture. So let's do better. If we are saying that we can remember different pains and different experiences in our communities, that we have a lot of, we have a lot of celebrations and commemorations, and we commemorate Pearl Harbor Day, right? Which is important to remember in our American history. We remember 9/11 because it's important to remember the loss of what occurred. We remember many other atrocities. But when we talk about racism, when we talk about the legacy of community and state-sanctioned violence that occurred towards Black and brown and historically excluded communities, such as our indigenous communities as well too, that somehow we want them to conveniently forget, as if it happened a long time ago. So when I tell people, well, my grandmother was born in the 1920s, and her father was born a slave. Yes, my grandmother, who I had until my end of middle school year, her father was a slave. It's how close in proximity this legacy is. Yeah. It wasn't super far away. If you talk to some of my family members, or if you talk to other family members of historically excluded communities, they can remember the rounds up of Black and brown people, and even some white sympathizers as well too, by the Klan. If you talk to some of my aunts and uncles and their experience with the KKK. When we think of the fact that the Ku Klux Klan was bankrupt due to the first lawsuit that occurred against the KKK by the survivor of a young man that was lynched in front of his family's house, right? His family sued the Klan for lynching him, and it bankrupted the Klan. People say, well, that was a long time ago. No, it wasn't, because that was in the late 80s, 1980s. When you talk to individuals like me that have done some work with the NAACP, did some activism work, that stood face to face with neo-Nazis and Klans and Proud Boys, etc., right? Well, those things are only happening in the South or rural areas. No. Los Angeles too. These aren't just distant experiences, and I really want people to understand that oppression and racism experiences towards our indigenous communities, towards our individuals that have been historically displaced, that are individuals that are being deported and unlawfully institutionalized, that are being sent to Guantanamo Bay, etc. Then we have to understand that this is a legacy that we've already been developing. This isn't new. This is a tumbling block of the remnants and the residue of a society and a system that has already created these practices and policies and ways of being for many, 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 many years. Again, this isn't new. So we must educate. We must be transparent. We must not utilize and communicate when it comes to injustices as if it's, some type of dreamlike Disneyland type of story that had happened a long time ago. When there are communities and systems and policies and practices and programming and protocol and ways of showing up that we are still mirroring the same injustices as a long time ago. It's still going on. So we must educate accurately. We must not be afraid to expose the cracks in systems, and being able to expose the crack in the system, or being able to expose a crack in a foundation does not mean that we don't like the house, that we don't like the community. When individuals expose a crack in the foundation, that could just be an opportunity for us to say, we want it to be better. We dream it to be better. We are invested in the healing-centered aspect of it being better. So instead of looking at the way that we are holding spaces accountable as a threat to the ability to have a sovereign nation and a sovereign community in a way that, of life that is antithesis to an American life, then maybe it is if you believe that being an American is not challenging systems and spaces that are harming others. And if you do not have the confidence as a leader to be able to take a step back and to say, let me listen to my constituents. Let me learn a new perspective without feeling that I'm challenging anyone's personhood or dignity in the process. We can have differences without jeopardizing the dignity and respect of others, without destroying the personhoods of other people. And I think that's a key if we want to challenge historical gaslighting and challenge the diminishing of pain of certain other communities as a necessary penance of surviving and thriving and living in the United States and other spaces. Because that sounds a little bit like domestic violence. If you feel that in order for people to live, in order for people to stay in the United States or stay in your workplace or stay in your spaces, they have to put up with pain and abuse in order to be residents of, in order to have benefits, in order to be financial stewards or have some placement, then that is mirroring an oppressive condition. It's looking a little bit like domestic violence. We must do better. All of us. So I hope this resonated with somebody. And I hope you all continue to give me some extra topics to kind of, rant about. I think that if we have confidence in our own convictions, in our own beliefs, in our own upbringing, in our own experiences, then the presence of difference will not shake that. It should not shake that. If you are faith underpinned, if you're a Christian, if you're a Muslim, if you're Jewish, if you are agnostic, if you are anything, faith underpinned, and the presence of somebody different than you feels like it is jeopardizing who you are, then I would challenge you to look deep within and say, how strong is your faith that differences makes you feel shaky? Even if you do not have a faith underpinning and you believe in something higher, such as yourself and your others and your family and your culture, I challenge you, if you feel the same way, to look deep within yourself and say, if I am feeling shaky about the presence of differences, what does that mean about my confidence and things that I care about? Because if you are confident, if you are strong in your convictions, nothing can shake that. So I hope that you all have a good day. And let's do this together, I think this is a good opportunity for us to be collective. We have no room right now for a separatist way of being and gatekeeping. Let's do this together. Have a good day.